So, Professor Kazim, Professor Nimit, welcome. You can keep your audio and video on, I think, now. Yes. Professor Nimit, we can see you.
Yeah.
Professor Kazim also. Here, how is the weather in Delhi now today? Is it?
It's a bit sunny today, so
Oh.
much better.
That's much. That's good.
Yeah.
Bangalore is progressively becoming warmer.
Yes.
I know you will feel jealous about it. So. But yes, but it was cloudy today. So we began with now opening.
Okay. But here in NCR, it is like sun after a couple of days. It's much better.
But winter sun is always blessing.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, Professor Kazim, welcome. So, you are still.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So, we are all set. How is the weather in Japan?
The weather is very nice, except the earthquake that we had 3 days ago.
Okay. How was the intensity?
It was 5.
Oh, 5. Okay.
And the upper floors. My building is 14th floor. I'm in 13.
Oh.
And
okay.
it was very shaking.
Oh, you could feel it.
Yeah. All our furnitures fall down. The TV was falling down, and but the house is fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got used to it.
What is the strength of the earthquake?
Yes, we are friends of earthquake here.
Yes, yes, yes.
All we need to do is just make sure that nothing is near us when we sleep. But the house itself is fine.
Okay.
Okay. But I think the buildings are designed to take care of all.
Yeah, the good point of the building is that it shakes.
Okay.
If it doesn't shake, it collapses. So
Right.
it is built to be very flexible and shake.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this, taller buildings are also around in your place, in your locality?
What building?
Taller than your 13th floor?
The tallest here is about maybe not more than I think 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In my city, there are not many. But in Fukuoka or in Tokyo, yeah, of course, there are so many.
Yes. So I think it is time we can start our discussion.
I can see Professor Cooper is writing here. It was 6.5 Richter scale. Oh, I thought it's 5.
Oh,
So
now you probably think you should have been scared.
So that's why the reason.
Good. Okay. So again, warm welcome to both of you to this forum, and let us start this discussion. So I will. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to those who have joined us from India, and good day to those who have joined us from other parts of the world, as I see a significant number of registrations from outside. Welcome to MIJSC at IIMB panel presentation series. This is called Nagin Samvad. I am Kaldeep Ratnam. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Grow India Japan Study Center. This is a center of excellence at the focus of this center is to strengthen the bond between India and that is our mission, by promoting academic, industrial, and societal interests. We are very pleased to welcome you all to the MIJ first panel presentation. Also, Samvad is conversation, uh, it's an expert conversation. It's a discussion series about specific topics amongst a select group of panelists from both India and Japan who share different perspectives on the same topic, and for, of course, the benefit of all of us, large audience gathered here today. Our panelists include Professor Kazem Wafadari, who is the division head of the Tourism Hospitality Department at Reinventing APU or Asia Pacific. And the other panelist, Dr. Nimit Chaudhary, he is a professor at the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management at Jamia Millia Islamic. Credentials of both the renowned experts is a very long list. However, I have tried to capture only some highlights about both of them, extracted from this long list. And I think that is will give you a flavor to introduce these two stalwarts to you. So first is Professor Kazem Wafadari. He's wearing many hats. One of the hats he's wearing is the director of the International Center of Asia Pacific Tourism, or ICAP. Another hat is the academic director of the Kunisaki City Research Center at World Agriculture Heritage at Oita in Japan. And he's the division head of the graduate school, as I mentioned earlier, of estimating tourism and hospitality department located in Japan. He has worked before with UN University, Kanazawa University, before joining the APU. He is an expert on tourism and natural resource management and tourism applications of agricultural heritage landscape. His research background includes community building, rural revitalization, and destination planning. So if any of you in the audience is interested or connected with any of these fields, here is your research man whom you can tap into. He has also worked with the UN FAO, or Food and Agriculture Organization, as an advisor, and he is a scientific committee member for the very famous ASH, or globally important agriculture heritage system, CIASS. As I said, the list is long, but I will choose another 2 or 3 of his hats. He has worked, he's very devoted to tourism development in Japanese rural traditional landscape of Satoyama and Satomi. He will focus his talk on some of these topics. He also works with UN WTO as an advisory board member for the Quest program. And as I said, his research interests are quite wide, but include development of health and wellness destinations by promoting edible and medicinal plants to food tourism in agriculture. So very, very interesting background of the speaker. We are all very much looking forward to hearing from this, as I'm sure you are. Professor Nimit Chaudhary, very accomplished researcher in this field. He's an engineer, of course, but an MBA and a PhD, a full professor in the Department of Tourism as an tourism motivated hospital. He's a Central University. Earlier to this, he was with IITTM, that is Tourism Travel. There's more than 8 years of experience. He has also taught as a full professor at a university in Mexico, Instituto Tecnológico de Estudios Superior. So if I have pronounced it wrong, please pardon me, Professor. He's also, since he was working in China, Shaoxing University in 2005, and later he was in Durham. He was also a visiting faculty at the University of Girona in Spain, University of Gotland in Sweden, Global Entrepreneurship Academy in Slovenia, then IIM Indore, ABV Institute of ITM, Information Technology, of Quality Management, Rajasthan, Jaipur, Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India, Hyderabad, and a host of other things. So he was very widely traveled, exposed to areas across India and the world. He is a referred researcher in tour leadership and has published on journals. So if any of you are interested in all this, you know who to contact. And he also authored 8 books and more than 100 things. This afternoon, I will attempt to set the context for the discussion that we have scheduled. The theme, as you well know, is reinventing tourism in a post-pandemic world. Lessons from India. So, we all have been in the middle of this pandemic, gone through the effects of pandemic, and the impact which COVID-19 has given to the world's all sectors of world's business has been tremendous, and we are learning to cope with these things. But most notable sector which is affected today, many of us who have earlier used to feel a sense of adventure and enthusiasm, talk about tourism, seems to be sort of curtailed. So we looking at how, especially this has affected India and Japan, because generally on an annual basis between 20 and 30 million tourists outside. So in this webinar, our panel of experts will shed light on how the tourism industry in India and Japan can reinvent itself and recover from the crash through both proactive and innovative approach. The panelists would also discuss and explore what India and Japan can learn from each other, and of course from other countries, in nurturing tourism, conducting businesses based on trust and codependency, building viable and sustainable new infrastructure, which is resilient. Some of you might have heard about what Professor Hazem was just now talking about, the earthquake which hit down a few days ago. And that is 6.5 on a Richter scale is mild compared to the effect which Corona has had on. So can we build a model which is resilient to shock, much more than just natural and some say man-made shocks like current pandemic? And adopting new practices that will allow people to travel safely in a post-pandemic world, eventually supporting the local community. The way we have structured this discussion today is that there will be these two panelists initially give an overview of the theme as they interpret it. This would be followed by some questions that I, as the moderator, would be posing to them. And it would conclude with they answering any questions that the audience has. So if we go through the webinar, as you go through the webinar, do please key in your query or your questions on the chat box. And you may like to also mention which panelist you would like the response from. Or if you are neutral, you can leave it. So either of them can do or both of them can. And they have kindly agreed to do so for all your queries. But if due to any constraints of time, we are unable to take up your questions, they both have agreed to respond to your queries through the email. And we would be sharing the email IDs in the chat box as we go along. So may I request Professor Kazem Safadari to start his presentation.
Thank you, Professor Ratnam. I don't see anything remained after your talk. So yeah, I just say my name is Kazem and that's it. So you did a great job. It's a very great pleasure to talk here with you and Professor Chodhari and other colleagues from India. As you instructed, the time is limited, so I want to go directly to the topic that I'm going to talk in about 10 minutes for the overview of the presentation. As the theme of presentation today implies, we are thinking of the post-pandemic. So it means that we have a great hope. And until now, we have to congratulate ourselves and all the countries who fight with this challenge. And this is also a resiliency lesson from all over the world. And Japan and India, they have been challenging a lot, and they have proved that they can unite and they can do a good job when they are challenged. So here are some notes from my talk today. I'm going to talk about the pandemic itself and how the world is affected, and then what are the answers, how different communities and societies, they answer this challenge. We have some solutions from different parts of the world, like domestic tourism or staycations, for example, and nature-based tourism that are from China, Pacific, or the Europe. In Japan also, we have the traditional landscape of Satoyama and globally important agricultural heritage that I want to mention, and the agricultural heritage tourism as one of the solutions for decentralization of tourism that is implying also social distance. So we are not going to put tourism apart. We are going to adopt a new form of tourism because tourism is very diversified and has solutions. So what we can learn from India and Japan together, I will emphasize on Japan as it's natural, and I leave lessons from India for Professor Jodhari to learn from each other. And then we are going to see how Japanese society faced and what government solution is the option. The first issue that I want to bring everybody's attention is about the rural and urban areas and environment. It might be interesting to know that for the first time in 2010, the population in rural and urban in the global world population became equal. It means that we are moving from rural to urban, and we are leaving rural area depopulated or with aged and old population, while still over 70% of the world food is coming from smallholder. You can see what is the result and the unsustainable future for that. And the solution that is agri-heritage is just invented, or let's see, reinvented by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. So we have to bring the heritage of agriculture back. And both Japan and India, they have a great agriculture heritage and civilization. That's why I selected GIAS, or Globally Important Agriculture Heritage. I look at Satoyama Landscape. In Japanese, Sato means community, and Yama is mountain or upland. And Sato, again, the community, and Umi is sea or ocean. Communities used to live in upland Japan or by the ocean. And there are a lot of Japanese Satoyama and Sato-Umi landscapes or rural Japan that is remained with these pure Japanese culture. You might have heard about UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and it's very well known, but probably there are many people here that they didn't hear about the UN FAO's initiative of agriculture heritage. And today I'm going to bring it up in this presentation. So what is Satoyama? Satoyama is a Japanese term. It's a mosaic of different ecosystem types. And it includes forest, farmland, irrigation ponds, and grasslands along the human settlements which has been managed and to produce bundles of ecosystem services for human well-being. So all we are looking for is to continue this human well-being, and we have to consider that what we are looking for around the world maybe is in next door, and we have it. And it can be a resource for our well-being and also for tourism itself. And what is GIAS? According to FAO's definition, GIAS landscape are remarkable land use system and landscapes, which are rich in biological diversity, evolving from the co-adaptation of rural community and populations with the environment and its need and aspiration for sustainable development. And you might then ask, so where are these GIAS landscapes? Do we have it in our country? Yes, in both India and Japan, we have GIAS sites. And I invite everybody in this webinar to look for the GIAS site in both countries. One of the mysterious one is in Oita, in the prefecture that I have been living in and our university is. We have many people from India here, fortunately, and I'm sure you should have heard about this prefecture. It's in the south of Japan, in Kyushu Island, and there is a tiny little peninsula that is designated as a World Agricultural Heritage. I would like to mention that I'm so proud and happy that I helped the local government and community here for the designation of this site. as an expert for agriculture heritage. And I'm going to tell you why and where is this heritage. So probably there are many students or maybe high school students that they like to do research. When you go and you want to study about agriculture, what is the approach? So the approach is in this diagram. You see human, natural, economic, and social capital. And these are the base for our study or our approach. What we are looking for can be categorized in these four. And you will see in my talk from now on that human capital is the engine for development. And in rural Japan, this grandma that I took her photo about 10 years ago was 65 at that time, and now is 75. So of course, you don't expect her to do traditional agriculture anymore because it's her retirement time. But if she stops, who is going to continue it? So you might think that, oh, Japan and India, who is poor, who is rich? Then I can say there is no certain answer to this. Do you have enough human resource? Have you been thinking of the continuity and sustainability of resources and the heritage that you have? If you left all grandpa and grandmas in the rural, then the population or the human capital is poor. We have also social capital. Are people able to work together? Do they trust each other? Do they help each other to build a new business, for example? In the pandemic era in Japan, we have a lot of local initiative on rural tourism. And this photo is showing one of the houses that my grandpas in Japan are gathering, thinking together how to solve their problem. And as you see here, one of the indicators that I did study in this research is that about 40% of them, when I asked them, why you start new business, new tourism business, they said that because the community leader recommended. It means that they trust him. If he says is okay, they do it. And this is a very high social capital. In terms of natural capital, as you have a lot and plenty of them in India, you can see rivers, mountains, and so on. But the problem is that how to pave the way, how to keep this landscape accessible. In the case of Japan, unfortunately, a lot of natural resources are undermanaged. In some countries, they are overused. But here in Japan, we have reforestation, a lot of trees, and lack of human resource to manage them. Economic capital in Japan is a very good and rich capital. We have infrastructure. In the top photo, you see a school, but don't mistake. These cars are not teachers. These are tourists. And the school is abandoned because there is no student anymore. There are hundreds of these kind of schools around Japan, and due to lack of students, they are abandoned. So local community made an initiative to change this to a tourist accommodation. And in pandemic time, they have plenty of rooms, and with social distance, people can stay here. So let me move on to GIS and how this landscape became GIS. This photo is Parviz Kuhafkan, who is the former director of Land and Water division in FAO. And he is the man behind GIS initiative and the idea. So he visited Kunsan Peninsula in 2013, and he visited the shiitake mushroom, the system of this area to be designated as agri-heritage. As you can see, there's a small peninsula. We have plenty of rain, not plenty, but enough. But as you see, small valleys that there are hundreds of them, they carry the water directly back to the sea. So we have lack of water. Water doesn't stop here. And in the past, they have created solution for that with digging thousands, over 6,000 of ancient water irrigation ponds. One of them is here in this photo. And just imagine if you have 6,000 of them around this peninsula, it creates a microclimate. This is something that, because it's too obvious, the people who were living there, they didn't recognize it. It was very ordinary for them. And this photo of me showing with the grandma that I lost her 2 years ago when she was 106 shows that these people are the living heritage. And also you can see a type of endemic plant here that nowhere else in Japan. This is only produced and processed in Kunisaki area in Oita prefecture. So I'll take you around this, and I show you that a pandemic brought more attention to this landscape, and they could utilize it for tourism. So as you see here, we have a specific species of plants and animal, and this is a giant salamander that is very rare here. Okay, attractions, endemic plants, unique experience, because you cannot find it elsewhere, you have to come here. The water ponds, plenty of wildlife, and shiitake mushroom farming. You can imagine that when you cut the wood and you plant shiitake, after a few years you have plenty of food every year, and the wood that goes back and change to the soil. So the wood become food, and the CO2 goes back directly to the soil and became fertilizer. What a clean industry, isn't it? But we are tourism specialists, and we are adding value to this traditional knowledge by tourism and visitation. Here is the shiitake production. The evaporation of water make the microclimate that is very suitable for shiitake farming, and the food. This is the structure of these water ponds, and you see how the different level of water is calculated, and water irrigation. These water ponds are a very clear example of agricultural heritage that can be managed by direct benefit from tourism. Same as the unique cultural heritage that you see here. Buddhism and Shinto are synchronized. This is the only place in Japan that you have Shinto gate on top of the Buddhist temples. And you see that how religions also are living in harmony. These photos are the festivals that I took, and I want to emphasize that they are not commercialized. They are in very, very late evening or at midnight, and they're not really a touristic, but a realistic and a very authentic. So you see that the lessons of revitalization through tourism was even more focused during pandemic, and people showed more interest to this kind of landscape. And these villages are just around us, maybe in 1 hour distance from our university. And our university students and teachers, they visited the place with number of numerous activities. And what we see that we utilize in this landscape is just the existing resources. So we have all these resources available, and we need to utilize them. A lifestyle that is very ordinary for people can be an attraction. You might see, what is this? You should not be surprised that if I say they are not chocolates. They look like black chocolate, but they are charcoals. And the villagers learn that if they make it in this shape, if they chop the wood, is D-shaped and there is no value. But in this small shape that need to have young trees, make charcoal for Japanese tea ceremony, that is has a very high value and value adding. So the problem, I told about good things of Japanese Satoyama, but the problem is that this grandpa was 93 at the same time when I took this photo, and he passed away. So he was 103 last year. So we have the initiatives. We should take the lesson and share these initiatives. We have chance to use the Satoyama landscapes. For example, these kids are from Tokyo. They never have chance to experience a big fire in the streets of Tokyo. And for this grandpa, it has no cost to make a fire here. So such an exciting event for the kids that are not able to do it in Tokyo. And for them, it has no cost. If you cut this tree, you get probably $5 US, but you need to pay about $100 to carry it down, and it doesn't make sense. So if timber doesn't make sense, tourism make, and they make activities based on that. For tourism also, I want to emphasize on institutional capital, enabling people to handle their business and to have less intermediaries and direct marketing, building in partnership and the authenticity of each area. And at the end, not the last, but I want to emphasize that to reinvent a post-pandemic tourism, we have to capitalize on our resources. We have to be realistic to think about authenticity, that visitors are looking for genuine experience, distinctiveness, how we are different and what we have original, partnership, which is very important, and rationalization. We are thinking of the optimize and the best number, not just maximizing the number. So I think by this, I summarized my talk, and the last but not the least that I want to show you is a webinar series that we started in American Asia Pacific University after pandemic. This is called SCOT webinar series, and I'm going to show you solutions that brought from many countries to the pandemic. I invite you all to go to our YouTube channel and watch the videos that you think is relevant to your topic. I know you have a very popular YouTube channel with Professor Ratnam's group, but here you might find something niche different. And for example, you can find the staycations as a solution that came from the Pacific. People who cannot go in far distance, they stay in their locality and they go with deep touch, and the local economy benefit a lot. This webinar is showing the domestic tourism in Asia, that we had guest speakers from India as well, and they showed that India and China, they have huge domestic market that can cover and can revitalize the economy during the pandemic. And the future upcoming of our webinar is a webinar series that we are doing with UNWTO on unwto.quest. In this webinar, one of the world's most successful DMOs, which is in British Columbia, in Canada, Thompson Okanagan, they are going to share their lessons from what they've done with the local community and the resiliency of the community. So this is the last part of my talk, and I want to pass the floor back to Dr. Ratnam, please.
Thank you very much. Great introduction, Professor Kazim. Happy to hear all the a summary of all that. I now request Professor Nimit Chaudhary to share his thoughts on this subject, and then we will go on to each one of them separately. You have to unmute.
Thank you, Professor Ratnam, for this opportunity. First and foremost, let me place on record my appreciation and gratitude to your team for having coordinated with me for this event, allowing me this opportunity to be talking to Professor Kazim. I'm very excited to be part of this panel. And let me also take this opportunity to welcome Professor Malcolm, who is there in the audience. Professor Kazim has already set the ball rolling, so I can very conveniently skip that background. My role for this opening remark would be talking about lessons that we've learned in India, how the tourism in India post-pandemic has shaped up or it's shaping up. So that's my small opening remark. That would be my small opening remark. I don't know this challenge. Post-pandemic, as there's more optimism as pandemic subsides gradually. We've just been hit by the third wave in India, but it's now receding, and a different time that's happening around the world. Tourism, as we all understand, and we realize that tourism was one of the sectors which was badly hit by this pandemic, and everyone around the world is gearing to resurrect themselves. As a part of this resurrection, tourism is now getting very, very competitive. One, because everyone intends to resurrect, they're bringing in new things, and everyone is competing for the same market. And second, many economies are planning to, everyone wants to do that, to make up for the losses that we've had in last 2 years. So India is no different. India at the federal level, India at the state level, everyone in their own places are doing this. Post-pandemic, there are a few trends that are emerging in India. So just talk about them. One, we all know that tourism contributes to economy, but then the new realization is that economy also helps tourism. Your tourism grows when your economy is doing very well. So this inverse relationship is something that we realized, and it's not only the economy of your country, it's the economy of your source markets, which is also important. So when your source markets economy is doing it, it helps you with your tourism. The second thing that we realized here is that what do we do when we are not getting visitors from outside India? And as Professor Kazim also noted, that India has a huge domestic market. So companies and destinations are relying on domestic tourism. But then it's not just the numbers, it's not just the statistics, it's an ethic. We need to have a tourism and travel culture in that country. Only then we can have a sustainable, growing domestic tourism market. And therefore, especially at the government level, which also doubles up as the DMOs, there have been significant attempt at mainstreaming of the culture of travel and tourism. So a lot of youngsters in India, a lot of people, almost everyone in the middle income groups, higher income groups, are now adopting traveling and tourism as part of their lives and their routines. Domestic tourism, needless to overemphasize this. Domestic tourism is the way forward. It's precisely what we've been doing. Even as I speak, the international borders are not opened up completely, and therefore we're relying on domestic tourism, and different destinations in India are reporting an increase of 10 to almost 27% in their domestic tourism compared to the situation which was there just before the pandemic, that is December 2019. Increased use of digital channels, digital platforms, greening of tourism, very, very important. That is another lesson that we've learned. And increase or upsurge in the use or acceptance of the shared economy in the tourism and hospitality sector. So these are the general trends, but how are we preparing ourselves for the new normal. One thing that Government of India at different platforms has been saying, and we also see it, around us, is that they say that during this pandemic, not everything was closed. Silently behind the curtains, they've been working really very, very hard. That's the claim of the government. And yes, to an extent, that claim is acceptable because there's a lot of infrastructure development in the country. Infrastructure development, particularly more related to tourism, aviation sector, for example, new airports are coming up, an entire new scheme of regional, called RCS RAN, which is the regional connectivity scheme, which is connecting smaller cities and smaller airports to each other. So 65 airports as on date, which will be increased to 100 airports dedicated only to RCS RAN by 2024. In India, we have around more than 400 airstrips, which are partially used for commercial aviation or fully used for commercial aviation. But yes, some infrastructure is there. It has to be updated. The rate at which we are creating expressways, highways is really worth noting. 4-laning expressways, the road superstructure in India the last 2 years is really, really improved. So is the case with railways, new trains, safety measures, revamping trains. Revamping trains means the vehicle itself, the routes. And the other day, the minister was talking about redesigning and revamping the railway stations. His idea was that railway station in any city should reverberate, should reflect the personality of that place. So that is the input that has been provided to these architects who are busy redesigning these railway stations. So infrastructure is something which has improved. And as we step out of this pandemic, New India will be greeted by this revamped infrastructure. Again, India is a big country, second largest population in the world, but and therefore, all kinds of tourism. We have this federal structure. We all understand this. So every state government on their own are almost free and willing to strategize, to plan, to position themselves as tourist destinations. But at the central level, of late, two themes have emerged. One is mainstreaming of sustainability for future tourism. So there's an increased emphasis that is being placed on mainstreaming, on sustainability. And second, again, I said there are a number of products private players would position their offers, but from a strategy point of view, MICE is one of the products that the Government of India is looking forward to with much hope. Both the commercial events and the business events and the social events like wedding tourism and other things. 4 dimensions of Indian tourism, if I may. These are the 4 ways I look at it. So, the revised estimate is that we are expecting around 30.5 million international tourist arrivals by 2028. And then when we were talking about domestic tourism, a full-fledged campaign called Dekho Apna Desh, see your own country. So that is how it translates. So it is a social campaign targeted at people so that it's a public will kind of a campaign where people are urged to travel more. The more they travel, the more they spend, more money gets into circulation, and that's the argument. Opportunities, India is ranked 6th in terms of World Heritage Sites. So there are 40 World Heritage Sites. huge domestic market. Just before the pandemic settled, there was almost 2,200 million visitations in India. Obviously, 2020, it came down all of a sudden. But now, as I told you, we're seeing a surge, partly driven by revenge tourism. People are bent on taking a revenge on their confinement, on their situations where they're confined to their homes. They're not able to travel. So more and more people are willing to travel. It's a growing economy. And very importantly, we are right at the beginning of this window of opportunity called the demographic dividend. It started in 2018. Unfortunately, this pandemic happened. The estimate is that this window is going to last until 2055. There's a revision. They say maybe the window closes a bit earlier, but in any case, not earlier than 2050. So we still have like 28, 30 years to go. Okay. Then to harvest these opportunities, to make use of these opportunities, there's a lot of policy support that is coming up. A lot of campaigns that are launched. I'll talk about a few more later. So we have the Swadesh Darshan scheme, which is a theme-based tourist circuit. So look at your country, dekho apna desh. Swadesh Darshan, there's a theme-based itineraries. Government of India announced 5 lakh is like 500,000 free visas to first 500 free visitors who are traveling to India, again to support tourism, international tourism. Then there are plans to tap into regional tourism by opening doors for South Asian country tourists. Even otherwise, the estimate is that, it's true for Japan also, and that 4/5 of your visitors globally, the general, the average is that 4/5 of your travelers travel to a destination from the neighborhood. So don't look at travelers coming from far off places. In case of Japan, it is 3/4 of the travelers, international travelers, who come from within that region, China and Hong Kong, Koreas, China, so those countries. In India, of late, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka started sending a good number of tourists to India, but we rely largely on English-speaking countries, US, UK, Australia, Canada. So these are big markets for us, but these are gradually being, rendered less important because we are also having increased number of visitors from our neighboring countries. And this is what the government is also eyeing. And as I mentioned, sustainability. Focus on mice as far as the products are concerned, products which are gaining currency in India, focus on transformational tourism in terms of adventure, wellness, spiritual, and all set as a slow tourism, wilderness in rural settings. So we'll be talking a lot about these rural settings. The Prime Minister's vision, which comprises of these 4S, Swachhta, which is hygiene and cleanliness, Suvidha, convenience, facilities, infrastructure, transport, Samay is time productivity, and Soch is thinking, which is innovation and rooted in our heritage. And finally, if I look at the strategy part, with this destination triangle, so all this while we had this very flamboyant external marketing campaign by the theme Incredible India, launched first in 2002, 2003. We're currently having version 2.0. So a revamped Incredible India was in place just before the pandemic happened. And then very interestingly, at least I have not come across any other example in the world where you have a dedicated campaign for internal marketing. And in India, it is called Atithi Devo Bhav, which translates as guest is got. So it is a campaign by the DMO, the national DMO, targeted at the internal stakeholders, the community and service providers to treat, reminding them that we need to treat our guests very well. But then this was the scenario just before pandemic happened. And during the pandemic and post-pandemic, we have a good number of other initiatives. For external marketing, Incredible India was targeted at international markets. As I told you earlier, Dekho Apna Desh is targeted at the domestic markets. Swadesh Darshan I've already mentioned. Then it was like Ek Bharat Shresht Bharat, which was like twinning of destinations. So say for example, Delhi is twinned with northeastern states. So for next few years, Delhi tourism is expected to promote northeastern destinations, and northeast is going to promote, and then a lot of capacity building that takes place there. Cleanliness was an issue that visitors, have been complaining for a long time. So a Swachh Bharat campaign is in place. I've just picked up a few of them. There are a lot of other such initiatives there. Then you have this interactive marketing arm of the triangle, which says that reaching out to the end customer. So as I mentioned, Digital India is yet another campaign with cashless, digitalization, re-engineering the business processes, right? So through digital ecosystem is in place, is being promoted. And again, to create that excitement among the internal audience, events like Paryatan Pav, which is the Festival of Tourism, translating it as Festival of Tourism, is being organized. Again, it's not a new initiative, it's like a few years old. But yes, government, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India is still pushing these kind of events so that there's more excitement and more people take to travel. So this was like all under the ambit of a bigger, thought that prevails in India, that's that of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India, reliant not only on the demand side, but also on the supply side in case of tourism. So you have a domestic demand and you have a domestic supply, and that is how you intend to have your economy going on. So these were some of my initial thoughts, and I'll be very happy to take questions from moderator and the audiences. Thank you. Over to you, Prasad.
Yes. Wonderful bird's eye view of the Indian perspective, what both Government of India and other agencies are doing or planning to do to address this challenge that we are facing. Thank you very much. I think both the panelists have done the context setting.
Professor Saidi, if your voice breaks and it goes missing in terms of some issue probably with your audio.
Okay. I will try to keep that in mind now. I hope. What I would like to do to Professor Kazim, I would like to ask you that you have talked about the Satoyama initiative, which envisions societies in harmony with nature. That's how you introduced it as a possible approach to reinventing tourism in the post-pandemic. Can you please share some of the perspectives in which this can be Satoyama initiative can be used, especially in terms of preserving or showcasing the local traditions, natural resources which you mentioned, and also about collaborative partnerships. So with regard to all this, can you elaborate a little more on the Satoyama initiative. Professor Sagar.
Sure. Let me share one of the slides, and I explain here. The initiative has a vision, which is societies in harmony with nature. As you know, we have a Millennium Assessment that was published in 2005 by the United Nations. And after that, we have sub-global assessments. Japan has one of the Satoyama sub-global assessments. And in this sub-global assessment, the different classes all over Japan, they gathered and they did a reassessment of their natural resources. And they came up with these 5 perspectives. The first one is resource use within the carrying capacity and the resilience of the environment, cycle use of natural resource, recognition of value and importance of local tradition and culture, then multi-stakeholder participation and collaboration with contribution to local socioeconomics. So the initiative and the origin is more based on natural resource management and sustainability and resiliency of natural resource. But as you can see, it's totally overlapping with the sustainable tourism. So if you see perspective 4 and 5, this is exactly what tourism is supposed to do, and resiliency through tourism, or the importance of local traditions and the recognition or revalue the local resources through tourism is exactly what Satoyama initiative is going to do. I hope I could answer your question.
Just the very first point, which is the resources used with carrying capacity and resilience. What exactly does it mean? I mean, in terms of, can you give an example to explain that?
Perfect. So, if people are coming to a locality because it's authentic, there is a level of authenticity that will not damage with visitation. If the visitation brings commodification of culture, and if it goes beyond carrying capacity, then there is no resilience. Then you force farmers to serve tourism, and once they serve tourism, they leave their agriculture, and then they are not authentic anymore, and the tourist doesn't like the place, and they have no agriculture and no tourism. So this is how we go to the circle of unsustainability if we don't really care about it.
Perfect. So I think that's an excellent answer in terms of authenticity. But is there a way it is controlled, or is it self-controlled?
The best way is to raise awareness, is to train and educate people about the value and the carrying capacity of what they have. I have some examples that I show you later, or maybe in the last slide, if you remember, in some of the villages that we organize this rural tourism, we ask people that in what level or in what extent they want or they are willing to. And also we give the initiative to local people to be part of the tourism development. If development comes from outside, it won't bring sustainability, but it should be them to decide in what level they want to develop tourism.
Thank you. I truly appreciate it. Professor Nimit, is my voice better now?
Yeah.
It's perfect.
For sure.
Okay, good. So, in your initial thoughts that you shared, you talked about the 4S model, which the PM has launched: Swachhata, Suvidha, Samay, and SCOT. I think the first two, to me and probably for the viewers, which deals with hygiene, cleanliness, convenience, I think this is relatively easy for us. And in a way, they are, you can call it very basic needs without which nothing can happen. But the other two, Samay and SCOT, it's interesting, and it's a, I would say, different source or different thought as compared to the traditional Swachhata and Suvidha. Can you elaborate on that and share your use, and what is it that is meant by it, and how can India address it?
Right. So let us understand this it this way, that Prime Minister was only trying to set the premise for good tourism, for tourism to grow and progress in the country. So he said these are the things which are important. So I spoke about Swachhta and Suvidha. For Samay, the example, the metaphor he used was the T20 games, right? Okay, so he said it's very quick. And the whole idea was that a traveler, a visitor, spends, waits for a long time to travel to India, say, especially from a Western country. He spends a lot of money, but all said and done, he has very limited time at his disposal, right? Now, this time cannot be wasted in downtime. So tourism has to be swifter. That is why I use the term time productivity. You cannot have poor roads. So if he's going like, say, for example, Japan, that is what we learned from them. The travel time between point A and point B is like very little. In India, if you're traveling through those roads, and that is where, infrastructure development, multimodal transportation, things have started coming up. So that was his idea, that don't waste a visitor's time in transportation and other things. He's queuing up for, something, waiting to get an entry into a monument or something like that. So say, for example, all ASI monuments, they encourage visitors to buy tickets online. So you don't have to queue up at Taj Mahal or any other place, even otherwise, pushed by social distancing norms and other things. So why do we have to do it? So this was the idea of the time. And thought was, he says that we need to look at tourism differently. Tourism, not him, but like I'm just trying to explain this, is a creative industry. It's no more a service industry. So the key to sustainable tourism business or being a good destination, competitive destination, is that we come up with creative ideas. So Prime Minister says that your tourism has to be much more innovative. It's all about experiences. So it's not about tangibles alone. It's about how innovatively do you present a thought, an idea, a story to the incoming visitor. And one of the ideas which he included in this thought was the traditional, the heritage of India. But again, it's not something which is out of the world. Every destination has a personality. A lot of visitors travel to a destination to feel, to be part, to internalize that personality of the place. So the best, one of the preferred, offers or where tourism has to be offered is to be in sync with the personality of the place, right? And I gave you an example earlier that the railway minister is now, asking all railway stations, or at least popular railway stations, to be redone in the traditional way. So that the first encounter a visitor arrives in Agra, or a visitor arrives in a South Indian city or in a Rajasthan city, Jaipur. So the first thing is heard of those pink cities and traditional architecture. So he should encounter that at the first instance, during the first encounter itself. So that was innovative thinking that Prime Minister had been insisting upon.
Yes, yes. First impression, they say, is best impression. So
even if it's not the last impression, it's a lasting impression. Yes.
So, Professor Kazan, you did talk about GIAHS as a solution for sustainable development. Can you please share with us the various landscapes on which this initiative is structured or based?
Sure. Let me again go back to one of the slides here. Yes. If I summarize the answer to your question, you might find agriculture heritage landscape next to your place. In India, you have the Kashmir saffron high value crop, and spice. So 1 gram of saffron is almost equal to 1 gram of gold, which means that people have been developing a landscape based on the natural resources that they have. If they have not enough water, they are not going to produce something like wheat or rice because it needs a lot of water. They produce saffron. And in different countries, in Japan, they have mountain rice terraces everywhere, as you do have in India too. Multiple cropping and polyculture farming. In the Philippines, for example, in the Ifugao rice terraces, you have more than 350 species of rice.
Wow.
And this is a truly intelligent heritage of humanity, that they do not need pesticide, because if a pest attack, it might eat 1 or 2 types of the rice. And we have hundreds of more different types to eat. So this is the coexistence of human and nature. This is the humanity and living in harmony with nature. In the peninsula that I mentioned right before this, the ancient irrigation system, thousands of water ponds. They create the water ponds, and from the shiitake mushroom farming, the rich soil bring nutrition to the water. It goes to rice fields, and then it goes back to the sea. And the fishermen volunteer to do forestry because they believe if it's a good forest, they have a better aquatic animal and production. So this is ancient irrigation and soil and water management system. We have nomadic and semi-nomadic pastoral system. You have in India, we have in Iran, and these land titles and this pastoral landscape has been kept by these nomads and their livestock. We have home gardens in Sri Lanka, for example. I've been in some areas in Kandy that you see a piece of forest that has everything in it. It looks very natural, but people have cut the trees and replaced with what they need for their everyday life. We have tribal agriculture. Again, in Ifugao, Philippines, I've been working with UNFAO, and they have kept these traditions. We have a high value crop and spices like Kashmir of India, and we have hunting gathering system that is not much remained, but it is reinvented in Japan because the hunters are very old now. They cannot hunt. And so many of these animals and wild animals, wildlife is back to the nature. So it can be reused for adventure tourism or agritourism too. So these landscapes are everywhere, but the most important thing is in what level they are kept and they are sustained, and why they are sustained, and how we can share these lessons of sustainability. So this GIAS created a network of about 50 countries now that they have this landscape, and people can talk. They can exchange the ideas of sustainability and resiliency, and to bring back the culture and heritage of agriculture.
I think just one follow-up question on this. I mean, I understand. I asked you this before also, but I will repeat for this question as well. Is there an overarching framework which controls this, or is it that you educate people and they manage it themselves?
A very good question. During last 15 years in FAO, this program is developed to a fixed program within the FAO, and it has its own secretary, and we have criteria for designation of the site, and it has an action plan every 5 years. It has some revisitation and to safeguarding this agricultural heritage. From the beginning to the designation is a top-down approach, but after designation is a bottom-up approach. So it goes to the community level, and with community collaborative and participatory workshop activities, the community develop their traditional knowledge and share and conserve it.
The question to you, Dr. Nimit, is you did talk about when you're talking about the policy support, you did talk about sustainability focus. Can you please elaborate on this and give some examples? What type of support is currently provided in this regard of sustainability?
Sustainability per se is, I mean, it's not about providing a support to sustainability. Sustainability is the approach, you know, and people and all stakeholders have to be like educated about sustainability, that we need to be sustainable, just like sustainability in any other sphere of economy, you know, sustainable practices, sustainable everything. But because tourism is a more contact intensive situation, therefore we're talking more about sustainability, but sustainability is just an approach. And the idea is that all stakeholders and the consumers, they need to have the right mindset, and therefore we have started talking about responsible tourism. What is our responsibility when tourism is created or when we consume tourism, right? So keeping in mind the Sustainable Development Goals, obviously there are certain things that are being done, but more importantly, we are talking about responsible tourism, and we're also talking about regenerative tourism, you know, leaving the place better than what it was before a visitor comes in. So that's the new thought. And I must say that this is one of the bigger shifts that tourism is witnessing in India and elsewhere, a change in mindset. People have gotten more conscious. They are more conscious of the fact that their acts, their activities do not harm the locale. And that is where the entire idea of sustainability is coming up. Just to flag, Kerala is one of the states in India which is doing extremely well with responsible tourism. And every time there's a talk of responsible tourism anywhere in the world, Kerala model is, you know, quoted as an example, as a success story. One more thing that, one more dimension that I must add to it is that why should an individual be responsible? And so it is an internal connect of an individual to the place. And therefore we're now talking of mindfulness, you know, and this consciousness, this mindfulness is also spiritual. So it's non-religious spiritualism, it's peace of mind, it's, I mean, you cannot afford to be an unruly visitor to a place and still be conscious and still be spiritual. So these are all interrelated concepts, and we're working on it. On the ground, there is a, from the government's point of view, it was not post-pandemic, definitely it was before pandemic, much before pandemic, Government of India took this initiative to create a code for safe and responsible tourism. So there is a code, and everyone in the tourism industry must swear by it that we do, you know, we will abide by this code. So there's a code in place, which is a code for safe and responsible tourism.
Very, I would say, exciting thoughts that you have shared. Exciting times. If all this, whatever you have been talking about, responsible tourism, regenerative tourism, not just sustainability, which is maintaining the status quo, but going beyond it. That's what you are saying. Interesting and exciting to hear. Professor Kazim, I have you again going back to your Satoyama Satomi initiative. Being an engineer, I always look for data. So can you share with us what is the significant impact that this approach has brought into Japan's number of international tourists, for example? Do you have any such tracking or data to substantiate this?
Yes, actually, if you remember, we had a Yokoso Japan, or Welcome to Japan campaign was initiated by the Japanese government about 8 years ago. They aimed to increase the inbound tourism number. In the beginning, after 2 years, we had the big tsunami that didn't help us, but it relevantly became or accelerated very quick. Maybe your question is more into what is the role of Satoyama and Satomi in that statistic increase of number from 6 million to 30 million. That in the just before pandemic we had 30 million of this inbound. The answer is Japan was perceived as a very let's say expensive destination to international tourists, and the solution was Satoyama and Satomi tourism. I can say decentralization of Japanese tourism and rural tourism, accommodation, food, and the programs or experience that international travelers could find in rather reasonable price in rural was the solution of internationalization of or part of the solution. Of course, the government opened the door and many other solutions, but they started to open up the rural resources to international tourists and a facilitation of this rural tourism development. So my answer is yes.
It's also very encouraging, both as a role model for other countries. But yes, this approach has been significant. You talked about from 6 million to 30 million, 5x change. So this happened in how many years?
I think it happened in 6-7 years. Yeah, one of our colleagues is here. Professor Cooper is more expert in this statistic numbers, but yeah, it was very quickly developed, and inbound tourism was everywhere in the focus of Japanese policy.
Thank you. Professor Nimit, whenever you talk about what are the challenges for India to keep up the number of travelers from other countries, especially some thought comes up, or somebody puts up this point that safety and security is one of the major challenges. Would you agree that this is indeed the case? And if it is, what actions does India propose to take or has been taken?
There is some element of truth in that, and I will accept that is a challenge. And at least if the consumer perceives it this way, it must be addressed. On the ground, statistically speaking, if you look at the crime per capita, it's not that bad. It's much better than many countries, but then that's not an excuse to shun away from this whole thing. But then that's a general situation. From a tourism point of view, let me tell you, government is, that was a concern, and therefore government swung into action. And this did not happen post-pandemic. Much before pandemic, in fact, I remember because I was directly handling this project like around 8 years back. So my students, on the behest of Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, we ran this call center for almost a year from our campus in Noida. This is a 1363 helpline, right? So this is a dedicated helpline, and then subsequently it was transferred to the Tata Group, which still handles it. It's called Incredible India Helpline, available in 12 international languages. So it is, as we know in India, 1800 11 1363, or the short code is 1363. Tourists anywhere in India can call this, and again, wherever he or she is in distress, they can talk about it. But then there is a whole ecosystem to support it. There are a number of helplines, dedicated helplines. Say, for example, you have this 1070 for natural disasters, 1071 for air thing, anything related, any problems with air traffic accidents or something. 1072 for trains, 1073 for road, 1091 dedicated only to women, because women's safety and security was a concern. So you have that. And then you have 112 helpline, which is like all-in-one helpline. Any kind of problem, anyone call this helpline. If it is more related to tourism, 1363 is good. And then, as I told you, Government of India came up with this code for safe and honorable tourism, right? So everyone in the industry must take a pledge, and this entire code talks about how one needs to take care of the guests, take care of their safety. Then there is a whole, gamut of these guidelines that have been issued. So how do you carry out adventure activity? How do you carry out tourism, rural tourism activity, or whatever? So these guidelines are there. Then Government of India, again, the internal marketing dimension of that triangle that I showed you, has very ambitious internal capacity building programs. The idea is that every touch point, every possible place where a tourist touches or has an encounter, they must return with a superior experience. So every touch point, be it cab drivers, tour guides, even pandas and priests in temples and dargahs and everywhere, these small shopkeepers, anyone and every one of them can be trained. So it has to be an initiative by, say, a state government. They can simply put up a proposal. Government of India funds these kind of training program. So the better trained they are, the better placed they are to take care of the visitors. Then there's a separate code, then there's a separate helpline. So the country and the administration is conscious of the fact, and they're taking adequate care. And there's a lot of states have come up with this tourist police concept also. Some of them have a separate department, some of them have separate cadres. And I know it because for last almost 10, 15 years, I've been training these people. Then you train, say, for example, the staff at the immigration. All airports, the immigration staff, they are drawn from paramilitary forces, right? So they are CISF personnel or BSF personnel. So they are trained to, for a different purpose. And now they are interacting with the visitors. So they are all trained. And last 2 years, we didn't have visitors, so these issues didn't come up. But probably this is going to come up, be taken up, and will move forward in a big way.
So just a follow-up question on what you said. You did mention a lot of these helplines. As per you, they are all functional and useful or helpful, or is there a fact that entropy starts setting in and start with a very high level of service and slowly there's a deterioration? Do you find that in this case?
No, the feedback is they are doing good. They do resolve problems. Again, last 2-3 years we didn't have, but when we started this, Delhi Tourism Office, 88 Janpath in Delhi, these guys were telling me that one single year they were able to help visitors get a refund of around 3 crore rupees. They were being cheated, or someone was trying to cheat them, so they intervened and they did help. The only challenge, and there was a question also on the chat related to this, what I would like to see is government needs to promote these helplines. So maybe the visitors are not aware of these helplines, so they need to be more visible, and customers, our visitors, our guests need to be made aware of that these are available and they can make use of it. So,
Your awareness building.
Awareness building is important, yes.
Professor Kazim, actually, I mean, there are some questions in the chat, many questions, of course. But one of the questions is linked with digitalization of travel experiences. And many countries are attempting it. And can you give some examples? Because we all have heard that Japan has many digital online tours arranged, so on. Of course, nothing can substitute physical. But do you see that happening in the future in terms of digitalization of travel experiences?
Thank you very much. Actually, even before pandemic, Japan was on the way to digitalize tourism and travel, to facilitate tourism and travel with digitalization and with facilitation through digital marketing and destination development. You perhaps know about the Japanese initiative, the government initiative of Society 5.0, that they are looking through the ways that they can mobilize the travel and tourism and facilitate it through a number of initiatives such as a mobility service. And also we have initiatives that museums or some sites that can go online, but there are a few let's say objectives. So if there are barriers that can be solved through digitalization, yes. In the pandemic era, we had the issue of distance and social distance. And this digitalization or digitization of the tourism can solve some of this problem to bring a more safe and secure environment for human interaction during the pandemic, like less contact with accommodation service people or restaurants, ordering tourism services. But as you know, tourism without or the tourism is something that you cannot bring or order the destination to your place. You can't order the hotel rooms and facility to your place. If you don't travel, you do not have that experience. And without that experience, you have no satisfaction. So there is a limit. But what I can say is how to facilitate tourism with the information technology or digital facilitation. And this is what pandemic was as a kind of facilitator, or pandemic brought this culture that people, for example, if we were going to do this webinar or conference online 5 years ago, you might be hesitating because saying, okay, because we don't have enough facility or money, we are online, so we didn't care about it. But now it's a new normal. So many of these became normal. And this digitization now is part of the tourism. But we have to understand that if we facilitate to bring the attraction online, how we also distribute the other benefit of tourism through this digital service. If you are selling the museum and people pay online for the museum, are they also willing to pay for the souvenirs that are sold next to museum? Do we bring a digital shop to sell and make sure that the community around museum also benefit or not? So this is, I think, very important. And Japan, as a country that has this infrastructure for digitalization of the destination, they have to bring this in mind, and Japanese policymaker also, that they should not ignore that tourism should bring a sustainable development. It's not just for development of part of the destination. And I think it will go through this in near future. But we have also different generations. Maybe young generations wants to have more digital services, and old generation and senior people like myself, we are not into very digital one, and we have to have analog. I hope this answered your question.
But even the old dogs like myself learn new tricks. So if that is very beneficial to us.
Yes, I'm also learning from this online classes and from my students, or the number of students and activities that we can do now, and we were not able to do it before. So in tourism industry also, they can find the benefit of this new environment. And for sure, we have to bring this development with inclusion. If we have inclusivity and sustainability in development, I think it will be a good solution.
Yes. Professor Nimit, I mean, you talked about the spiritual tourism, and one of the chat questions is also that medical tourism is again talked about, India being one of the destinations for both spiritual and medical. But surprisingly, the educational front is missing from all this. So what are your thoughts, you think? Though we seem to have a lot of institutes offering reasonably high standard of education, but we seem to be unable to attract. Similar problem is there in Japan, but that was because of language, because you need some competency in Japanese language to enter some of the Japanese language universities, though they have English language universities, some of them. But in India, language is not a problem, but still we are unable to attract number of students. What are your thoughts on that?
One, both spiritual and medical are part of the wellness tourism concept, and India really intends to do good on those things. But coming back to your question, single reason why we're not being not able to harness this educational tourism market was simply because of the policy, the educational policy that was in place, and now which didn't permit. We did permit. We didn't permit this exchange thing and counting of this only in very limited sense in IITs and IIMs. To a very limited extent, this was allowed very selectively. But now this issue has been addressed in the new national educational policy with this academic banks of credit, lateral entry, lateral exit thing, permitting Indian universities to partner with. To begin with, they're putting a condition that it has to be partnership should be with top 200 ranked universities around the world. So that's a good beginning. So the only thing is that internationalization of education in India was not permitted until now. But please watch out. Again, you refer to digitization in the previous talk. So with digitization, with the cost advantage that India has, you could see a lot of international universities setting up their campuses in India. This has happened in Vietnam. I mean, we will not compare with Japan, but a lot of them have done it in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in UAE, because of internationalization. Internationalization per se is good, but we were not permitted to do this in India. So now this is opened up, and probably that would be the next good thing happening to India as a destination.
Sure. Very relevant information for all of us. Professor Kazim, Professor Nimit mentioned about the revenge tourism. People are fed up being cooped up in their houses for 2 years plus, and there seems to be a state of at least the domestic, within India, touristy places like Himachal Pradesh, which is in the mountains, there is so much of rush that there is hundreds of or thousands of cars waiting to enter Himachal Pradesh or Uttarakhand. So, have you in Japan also experienced this revenge tourism? Meaning, doing it at a breakneck speed and volume after the pandemic, or when the pandemic sort of started ebbing?
I think the human nature and tourism is interrelated, and it will naturally happen. So just a break that prevented people, and people are waiting for a post-pandemic. But how to manage this engine for sustainability is very important. Otherwise, it might destroy some part of the market, or it might bring some issues that may change the image of a destination and so on. So I think we, as tourism industry and tourism policy makers, we have to think about what and how we can, or what platform we can design that post-pandemic not only bring back the industry to economic development, but also it can protect local communities with the destination and the development of the past. I think it will happen sooner or later, and the more we prepare, the more we can get the benefit of it. Yes, I think Japan is not an exception.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Professor Nimit, we have heard that we all know that small businesses, which is what you call building blocks for the travel industry, are typically unorganized and widely prevalent, especially in tourism sector. But is it a good idea, do you think, that to make these businesses more organized in order to reap richer dividends for all the stakeholders? Do you think that is a good idea?
I'll be honest on that count. The popular demand is that in India is that we need to declare tourism as an industry and make it more organized. I do not know what happens. Strictly my own opinion is, the way I look at it is that tourism is largely a part of a gig economy. A lot of part-timers, a lot of interns, they work in it. The way, again, tourism industry is huge at the bottom of the pyramid. It's decentralized, it's everywhere. It's a lifestyle industry. And let us also understand that for many service providers, it is not the only vocation. It is, an add-on revenue stream for them. And let me also tell you, people who were, businesses which were only, which have put all their eggs in one basket, and the basket was tourism, suffered more. People who had different skills or who had their risk distributed, survived this pandemic also. So I'm not very sure if we're going to do a lot good to the industry. Yes, the bigger players may benefit, but the way this is played out tourism is played out. They're more of a small, and not even a small. These are micro players. A tour guide is a one-man company, right? He has business only for 5 to 6 months. That's the season, tourism season. Now, how do you organize this? Why do you make it? Tourism is a very seasonal business for most companies. They operate in particular products, particular markets. How do you force them to pay minimum wages around the year? So this is going to in a way complicate certain things. And other thing, I mean, what Professor Kazan mentioned in the very beginning, say, for example, rural tourism or agri-tourism, as we call it. If you have it as organized and then agriculture takes a, is reduced to a supplementary revenue source, and tourism becomes the prime focus, and that disturbs the entire balance. In fact, it's agriculture, it's a rurality, it's different setups that support tourism, that provide the context and premise for tourism. Very recently, Ministry of Textiles, Government of India, very recently means last week, I was listening to the secretary and he said that they have adopted 13 villages, which will also supporting craftsmen there. So rural crafts will be supported, and this will be an additional source of income for these craftsmen. So tourism, and he was speaking on the platform of Ministry of Tourism. So that is where tourism and textile ministry marry, their efforts at least marry each other, so that there's benefit. But it cannot be strictly, a very, very organized sector. A lot of the small home stay owners, bed and breakfast, they do rely on unorganized manpower. So I don't know if it's really a very, very good idea and if it's going to work. Every year when the budget is about to be presented in the parliament, a lot of people, there's a lot of clamor that we should declare it an industry, but it's not happening, and I don't know if it's going to happen any soon in the near future.
What do you think? I mean, how is it handled in other countries? Is it organized or is it left to the individual? Is it widely disorganized or semi-organized, or is it structured, organized? What is it?
Tourism industry, I'm not very sure of the specific examples, but tourism industry for sure, 90% plus in most economies is small and micro players. Hardly, I mean, the way we in India define as, large scale companies, I don't think there's a single tourism company which is a large scale company. Maybe a hotel chain or so, hotel group or so, but otherwise, they're at best mid-sized companies, then small companies, and largely micro and not even micro, very, very micro size, one person companies. And if you remember, I mean, the government has just a couple of years back, they have amended the Companies Act to bring in this one-person company thing into our framework. So now one person can have a company with limited liabilities. So that is what is being done. So, I don't know if you've heard of this tourist guide who became very popular because of his histrionics in Tamil Nadu. So for his mudras, so he would take tourists to the temples and try to explain, and he would perform those mudras, dancing mudras. And I was talking to him a couple of days back. He's essentially in agriculture. So half of the time he works in his fields, agricultural fields. Part-time he works as a tourist guide. There's so many people, who are, say, a professor of physics who went to Germany, knows Germany. So part-time he performs as a historian or archaeologist. They conduct part-time, Sundays they are organizing these heritage walks or city walks or nature walks, So there are a lot of people from other places, so they work part-time, and that is how this industry thrives, at least in India. So I'm not very sure.
What Professor Kazim also was talking about, how part-time they do some other work and then they also do this. And this helps them because if you depend too much on tourism and the pandemic strikes, then you're nothing to eat. So wonderful. I think we have learned a lot from both of you. There are a lot of questions which we thought we will discuss, and there's a lot of questions. But We will be sharing with the audience your emails, and if they come in touch with you, I'm sure you'll be very happy to respond to them.
Sure, sure.
Just to in the closing, can I ask both of you a 1 minute summary of your thoughts on world post-pandemic? Professor Kazim first.
Thank you, Professor Adnan. Post-pandemic is still expected, and we are still unsure about real post-pandemic and when. But as academia, we have obligations, and I feel that we have to, as we are expected, as the intelligent service of the society, we have to bring more input. We have to train the industry and make them ready for it. And this also needs preparation from our side as well. The industry has suffered, and especially tourism industry. And the pandemic gave us the lessons that we are using it in our education. So if you let me, maybe if you give me 1 minute, I can share another initiative from our university, which is a new college. Reinventing Asia Pacific University, as we have many students from India and international students body. Up to now, we had 2 colleges. And we are preparing a new college, which is called Sustainability and Tourism. And in this new college, we have been revising our curriculum and syllabus that because we found that there is worries in our student body that what will be the future of tourism? What is the post-pandemic? Many families are also thinking of the jobs that their student or their children can have in the future. So I think we need to prepare. We need to make sure that we are able to coexist with the pandemic. And pandemic will go away with our resiliency. So we are going to last and stay. So I think as our obligation, we have to train human resource that they are prepared to serve the industry with the pandemic. And the example of this from Japan and from Reinventing Asia Pacific University is the new college that we have established already and is going to be open next year. So I would like to invite everybody to send feedback or comment, or if there are colleagues from universities in India and the industry, we are very open to collaborations. And our colleague in admissions of Asia Pacific University are also keen to do so. So I think we are all facing same problem, and we have to see how different localities are solving their problem, and we have to think global and act local. And this pandemic gave us a lesson that the world is limited, natural resources are shared, and even we have technologies and go beyond, we can go beyond all the borders of the past. Even we have LCCs and we can travel and fly all over the world. But if the nature wants, it can stop us. So if you gather all the virus that is called Corona or Omicron or Delta, altogether, I don't know, in size, it might be even less than a few kilograms. And it stopped the whole human movements. So we have to be obedient to the nature, and we have to accept that we are part of the nature. And this is what lessons that I learned as a part of my organization and professional obligation. Thank you so much.
I think, yes, I think the summary of what you said in a way is that training, education is required for sustainability and resilience, and awareness building is the key. Thank you. Your thoughts, Professor Nimit, in short?
Let me begin with this comparison. I mean, in fact, there's no comparison between India and Japan. But if you compare the population densities, sometime around 2008, 2010, I mean, for a couple of decades before that, India and Japan had almost the same population density. But population density since 2008, 2010 in India has surpassed the population density of Japan. So the population is growing, the population density is increasing, the population Japan is stabilized. Then going back to one of the early remarks that Professor Kazim made, that world is now 50-50, 58% urban, 50% rural. But understand that in India, it's still around 70% rural, which means that on average, India is more rural, more open, less populated, but which also means that our urban centers are much more congested and populated than other places in the world. Simple mathematics. Why I'm saying this? Because I am a firm believer that this, urbanization, this divorce from nature, Professor Kazim also pointed that out, is one of the sources of mental and psychological stress that people are facing all over the world. And therefore, the future of tourism is, transformational tourism, where people travel to seek transformation. The only reminder is that when you travel to seek transformation, you also need to be a mindful consumer yourself. So mindful consumers seeking transformation is the future of tourism, and India, with a lot of open space, with a lot of traditional products which are rooted in its history and heritage, like Ayurveda, yoga, and all other, is very well placed to address the expectation and meet and in fact exceed the expectation of these international travelers. Just a last example. You have this whole concept, many of your audiences know this, a compulsory military service for youngsters in Israel, right? So they compulsorily serve military in a very, very terrible situation. So they're very stressed at the end of this compulsory service. They get their salaries for 24 months, 32 months girls and 24 months, 24 months girls and 32 months. The boys serve this IDF, Israel Defense Forces. They rush to India and spend 6 months to a year traveling in rural and remote areas of India. We have been doing research, we've been talking to them, and the single theme that emerges is that they are seeking peace in this rural Indian landscape, community and society in this setting, rural setting. So that is what India has to offer to the world. And if we do it right, if we market it properly, if we have this last mile connectivity or at least better connectivity, probably the future is bright for Indian tourism. Thank you.
Positive thoughts and very, encouraging to all of us that the current may be very dim because of the corona, but the future is looking very bright for both India and Japan. And on this happy note, I would like to again thank the two panelists. Be happy to have you first, rather, and thank you for being part of this IJSP MIJSP forum. And we hope to have you again. Hopefully, the next time it will be on a physical domain.
Sure.
Welcome you to the Institute of Management, Bangalore. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.